Mm, mm. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all again. We're a bit light on questions today, so I think we were hoping there might be some more, but we've got plenty to talk about, haven't we, Brian? And particularly if it's if it's quite a technical question, you're going to get a better answer if you give us a bit of notice before the next Q&A, so we can be prepared. Ah, that's all right. Yeah.
Hello? That's probably working now. We'll have to wait a few seconds
Yeah.
for somebody to confirm. We've got a few people watching, that's great. We've got some activity in the live chat. I'll just wait for somebody to confirm that the audio is okay.
Oh, I should say it as well. No. Can someone confirm that the audio is okay from Brian now?
I've put it into the chat as well.
Oh, I see. Right.
Nobody's responding at the moment.
We've all gone to make a cup of tea.
It's okay now, apparently. All right,
Good.
so we'll start again. Sorry, everyone. We always have these slight snags. So hi, everyone. I'm Brian Waters from the QTube, which is a community of principally composers for film, TV, and games. We've been going since last year, and we have about 7,000 members now around the world. And one of the things that we've started doing is, okay, it's only on one side. I'll have a look at that in a moment. One of the things that we've been doing is these live streamed question and answer sessions with Yellow Technology, who are a company based in the UK offering technical services principally for composers in helping them set up, maintain and upgrade their space. So it can be furniture, it can be acoustics, it can be computer hardware and software, all sorts of different aspects of the workspace for a composer. So they're a really top company working with some of the best composers here in the UK and abroad. And so we're really happy to be able to do these monthly sessions with them. So please send in your questions. We only had 2 this time. It's a great opportunity for you to get some advice, and you can send them at any time, and we will just keep them in a bank and then try to get through as many of them as we can in the next live session. So yeah, contact us at any time with those questions. So I'll just hand over to Pete and let him introduce himself again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Pete from Yellow Technology. It's yeah, we're doing this once a month with Brian, and it's been interesting to see the sorts of questions that are coming in. So yeah, keep them coming. The more varied, the better, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got. I'm just trying to see how to make my sound mono, because apparently it's only coming out one side for some reason. I think I know why that is, but I don't quite know what to do about it. But anyway, my audio is not the important one really here today. Pete's is the important one because he's giving the answers. So yeah, we've just had the 2 questions today, and then we're going to have a little general chat about something which everybody faces at one time or another, which is upgrading your sort of computer hardware and how to sort of make decisions about that. So yeah, Pete, do you want to just quickly go through those 2 questions that came in?
Yeah, sure. So the first question, so these are both questions from Reg.
Yeah.
They're kind of follow-up questions from the last Q&A, really. So his first question was, why, even when I master my tracks to be as loud as possible without distortion, louder than -14 LUFS, very low threshold for the compressor, etc., they still sound way softer than those by famous artists, especially in the dance music on SoundCloud? Well, I think you need to remember the key thing here, which is the difference now. In the old days, that's exactly how you did it. You pushed everything as high as you possibly could, and you know, got the level pretty flat at a high level. But that doesn't work anymore, because as Ben was explaining last time, it's all about the dynamic range. If you have everything really loud all the time, then that's going to give you a really narrow dynamic range. So the streaming services are going to see that, and they're going to bring it down. If you have the wider you have your dynamic range, that they're not going to bring it down so much, because they're going to see peaks and troughs rather than just seeing this big wall of sound. So that was, you know, Bren was talking about the difference, you know, going from Beethoven to Metallica. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep everything the same kind of loudness. So there's no point in trying to bring everything up to a very high level. Mm-hmm. Need to stick with the dynamic range. Okay. The second question was, I have experience of using REW for analysing the acoustics of my room, but I'd be happy for you to shed some light on this. How does the SPL of a specific frequency relate to the SPL of a band or full spectrum? E.g., if I have 80 dB at 250 hertz, it's not as loud as having 80 dB of white noise, or is it? Well, what we're talking about is energy, really, and what you're saying is that if you have the same amount of energy in a single frequency, mm-hmm. or a small band of frequency, then it's going to sound louder than that same energy across the whole spectrum. Yes, that's probably true, because you're spreading the energy, and it just overall it won't sound as loud. But as you compress that into a single frequency, yeah, all that energy is going into one frequency. So yes, that sounds louder, but you know, that's perception thing. I mean, that's an interesting thing about doing sound insulation, is that you'll see a lot of claims for sound insulation products that talk about a kind of overall loss over the over a barrier, and that can be talking about the whole frequency spectrum, whereas you're concerned about various areas of it. So if you're a rock band, then you're going to be concerned about the low frequencies, and if they're just blended into everything else, then you might not have the answer that you're looking for.
Okay.
So there you go.
So do you tend to tailor it a bit to the type of work that the space is being used for?
To some extent. You mean in terms of sound insulation?
Yeah.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, with any sound insulation, you're trying to limit it to what's absolutely necessary, because it's really expensive, sound insulation. People talk about soundproofing rooms. That there's no you can't really soundproof as such. You're putting insulation in, and as much as is necessary to achieve what you need to achieve. So if you're just listening to music at a reasonable level all the time, then you don't need so much insulation.
Yeah.
If you've got a professional drummer playing, that's the hardest possible thing to insulate. We've done this on a couple of occasions, and professional drummers just play so loud that it's really difficult to insulate. And when I say really difficult, that equals really expensive, because the techniques are greater, the amount of material we need is much greater. So it always pays to be pragmatic about it. If you can fix your sound insulation issues by doing things at a different time of day, or monitoring at a lower level, or just sort of making a compromise in terms of how loud you go, then you're going to save a huge amount of money.
Sure. And I suppose that if you're not using a lot of acoustic instruments, then you've got more flexibility with how you use the space, really.
Yeah.
And perhaps more chance to avoid expensive sound insulation, really.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
really the guys that are doing a lot of acoustic instruments that have got to usually need something expensive.
It is, yeah. But I mean, you'd be surprised. Most of the studios we work on don't have that high level of insulation, really. In most cases, people kind of come to the realization that, if I really need to get absolute perfect sound insulation, then I'll go and use a studio somewhere else. It doesn't happen that often. Most of the time you can get what you need to get with, you don't need perfect isolation unless you're doing something really quiet with a really delicate instrument. So
it's the two extremes, isn't it? Either something very quiet or something very loud. That's where you have the problems, really.
Yeah. I mean, depending on what you're trying to achieve, because obviously you might be looking to keep sound in, or you might be looking to keep sound out. Probably a bit of both normally, but again, it's like if you're, a lot of people have garden rooms, for instance, and look how to insulate those. Well, if it's far enough away from surrounding properties, then you've got a head start, really, because distance will make a lot of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And away from traffic as well, to avoid. Yeah. Because I suppose would it be fair to say that the majority of studios that you're working with, they are more composing spaces than recording spaces, do you think? Or is it 50-50?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say more, certainly more. There aren't that many that are sort of dedicated recording spaces. I'd say probably 25% have a dedicated recording space.
I suppose one of the things as well is that composers seem to be getting into making their own sample libraries, and they're probably concerned about keeping those as clean as they can. That's perhaps another use case, if you like.
Yeah. But there's another example of where, you're not recording an hour-long symphony, you're recording a very small piece. So, if you get a disturbance on the first time you do it, is it that big a deal just to do it again?
Oh yeah.
You're going to save yourself save a lot of money by just living with that sort of compromise.
Or just renting a studio, as you say, for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we should promote the fact that there are still studios out there.
Indeed. We should get this sponsored by some studios.
They probably haven't got any money.
All right. Well, I'm assuming that the sound is okay, and I'm assuming that everyone's happy with that answer. For those guys that are watching us, which is about 6 guys, it keeps changing. Let us know if you have any questions, because we're gonna talk for maybe another 15 minutes, I guess. So, Pete, you were going to just take us through the kind of journey that you would recommend for someone who's either looking to perhaps set up from scratch with a computer, or maybe they've got an aging computer and they realise it's time to replace it. So, what sort of is that basically what you had in mind?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of particularly at the moment, there are a lot of new computer technologies around, and so it's just a time when we have a lot of questions from people about when's the best time to do an upgrade, and I think it can often be tempting to go for the latest technology that's come out. And different people look at it different ways. That we've got some clients who always stay up to date with the latest computer, and we've got others who keep their computers for a very long time. And that's not. You'd probably be surprised. That's not split down the line of those who can afford it and those who can't. Actually. Right. I can think of plenty of people who are very successful in their field, who hang on to their computers for as long as they possibly can. Yeah. And I mean, I think there are pros and cons of both. And I think probably the best thing to do is not to go to either extreme. So not to immediately jump onto the new technology as it arrives, but similarly not to hang on to the old stuff too long, because we've done a system recently where we're upgrading from a very old Mac Pro, one of the first of the cheese grater Mac Pros, to a new Mac Mini. And whilst that is a major upgrade in terms of performance, it's also quite hard for the person whose system it is, because suddenly they have to change their way of working on everything. Right. They've got a new operating system to deal with that's very different to what they were used to. They've got a new version of Logic that they've got to deal with, which has changed dramatically. All the plugins are different to how they were. You've got to deal with all those things all at once. And while it is a better system, it takes the kind of joy out of doing it in a way, because it's it's so difficult to deal with.
You sort of lose a bit of productivity, yeah, during that period.
Yeah,
I guess
definitely.
A bit of flow, yeah.
Yeah.
Your creative flow is probably quite disrupted, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, things have changed, I think, in terms of operating systems over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, where previously you would have, there was quite a pressure to move to the latest operating system because it made certain things possible that weren't possible before. It's less like that these days. So, you know, we're commonly at least one version of operating system behind, possibly two, and that's not generally a problem. So again, we discourage people from moving to new operating systems too quickly. And, you know, our clients regularly contact us to ask if they should upgrade to the latest operating system, and you know, we will advise them as to whether that's a good idea now or whether it isn't.
So generally, in general, you would advise caution unless you hit up against a brick wall where you can't actually do something that you need to do. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I mean,
or perhaps just,
you know, as I say, there are different types of people, and you know, I'm a tech head. I like to get the latest gizmos. So I do understand people who just want to go for the latest thing.
Yeah.
There's no particular problem. You just have to be quite cautious about it, and that's really where we can help, because we've got the experience of what's going on, and we've tried these things, and we know what the pitfalls are going to be. So that's where, you know, that's where you're going to get caught out, is if you don't really know what you're going into. You can get into a very sticky mess quite quickly.
And would you generally advise any kind of rule of thumb, like don't upgrade to something that's not been on the market for at least 6 months or something like that? Do you think that's a sensible approach to sort of make sure that the technology is stable? And
it's definitely a sensible approach to
hardware,
to get some kind of information on that. Yes, I mean, I wouldn't put a rule of thumb in place, actually. It used to be the case that, you know, new machines, you'd really want to wait. I mean, back in the days of the G4, you tended to wait for the second generation of the machine before you actually went for it. But it's not so much the case these days. There don't tend to be any real problem machines anymore. But yeah, it just needs a bit of careful thought. And you know, particularly when Apple launched we talked about the M1 chips last time. That's something where you've got a completely new element to the system, and you've got to be really careful or really sure that you're willing to make that sacrifice, because you could very easily go into something where suddenly nothing works anymore, or a critical part of your system you can't use anymore until something happens. So
have you had any have you got any anecdotes about someone who's rapidly upgraded to the very cutting edge and they've just got their fingers burned, kind of thing? Maybe literally.
Oh, definitely,
maybe literally got their fingers burned. I don't know.
No, I don't think literally, but no, I mean, I can think of at least a couple of examples where we've had a call saying, I've just upgraded and nothing works anymore.
Nothing works, yeah.
And
fairly serious, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing works, but apart from that, I'm delighted.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, things like operating system upgrades, people tend to think that they just go seamlessly these days, and they don't. They really don't.
Would you advise against automatic updates? Would you tend to advise you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't generally go for automatic. I mean, particularly major updates. Security updates, fine. You should do the security updates. And, you know, things like updating Safari and that sort of thing, that's fine. But anything that's operating system based, really, you want to
Be in control of.
You want to make sure you've got a backup in place before you start.
Yeah.
That's the thing. We would never do an operating system update without a backup. We've been burnt before, and we just wouldn't do it. You tend to think that things have advanced so far that it can't possibly go wrong, but it can.
So good housekeeping practices and all the rest of it, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any fundamental difference? I mean, well, like, what's the split in people that you're working with in terms of PC versus Mac? Is it predominantly Mac, yeah?
Yeah, by a long shot.
Like 90%, or what would you say? Like
I'd say it's probably more than 90%,
seriously?
actually. Yeah, I'd say it's... I mean, I'm trying to think of... I can count probably just beyond the fingers of one hand the clients we have on PC.
Oh my gosh, I'm quite surprised. In my naivety, I thought that PC might have more presence, you know?
Not really. I mean, I think it has more presence in the States than it does here. But no, it's quite, I mean, of course, we have to do, on those few clients who do have PC, it's far more difficult to maintain those systems, and that's really why people don't tend to go down the PC route. You know, the PC route always had a reputation of being the less expensive route. And there's a degree to which that's true, but actually, for when people talk to us about whether they should go down the PC or the Mac route, we tend to sort of look at the doing the equivalent thing. You know, you can build a cheap PC, but if you were to build a PC with the equivalent power of a Mac, of a Mac Pro, for instance, you would be spending a lot of money. I mean, yeah, you might get the components in a bit cheaper, but then you have to build it, you have to troubleshoot it. You know, the thing with PCs is that no PC is the same. So any software that you use on it probably has never been used with that specific configuration before. If you use a Mac, you can guarantee that the software you're using has been tested on that Mac.
Right. So, okay.
Interesting. So I'm not a Mac evangelist. It's just from a pragmatic point of view. If you just want your system to work, which most people do, then I think, yes, you might pay a little bit more for a Mac, but you'll generally save yourself from a lot of headaches.
Okay. So would you go as far as actually, you know, discouraging people from, if they were saying, you know, do you think I should go for PC? You would try to steer them a bit down there.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, you know, we're not really in the business of selling computers, so it's not. We're really, without sounding too cliched, we're in the business of selling solutions. You know, audio systems, and that's just one. Fairly major component of it, but you know, what we're trying to do as a company is to build systems that are reliable and that you as a creative person don't need to worry about. And in all honesty, we couldn't recommend that the PC is a good route if you want to be absolutely sure that it's rock solid.
Yeah. Okay. So when someone's considering which Mac to get, how do they make that decision? What sort of criteria are they looking at? You know, what are the determining factors, really? Instead of just buying the highest spec, the most expensive, which is a fairly, if you've got the money, that's the lazy way to do it, I suppose. But But if you're trying to sort of, you know, decide what you need, what's the process for that?
Well, I think obviously budget's fairly critical.
Yeah.
So that's going to sort of narrow down your options to start off with. You know, if you were looking now, for kind of studio-based systems, not counting kind of portable systems, studio-based systems, we tend to be looking at either the 2018 Mac Mini or the Mac Pro, 2019 Mac Pro. And there's quite a big leap there between the two.
Okay.
But for most people, the Mac Mini is probably sufficient.
Yeah.
You know, it can get 64 gig of RAM. It's very high performance. It's going to last quite a while. That's one thing I wanted to come to, is that often I think people think that that you're going to somehow, there's some kind of time situation that's going to catch you out, and I don't think that's as true as people think it is a lot of the time. So
that it's going to be obsolete, kind of thing, after it.
Yeah. And you know, particularly if we're talking to someone about buying a computer now, and they're worried about a newer machine coming out in 6 months' time. I think you've got to decide what the right time is to do the upgrade for you. Because if the right time is now, then even if you buy a machine now and another machine comes out in 6 months that's better, I always encourage people to think, well, how much has that cost me? You know, if I buy a £5,000 computer today, and in 6 months' time I decide I want to buy the newest £5,000 computer, I can probably still sell that £5,000 computer for £4,000.
Yeah.
So it's cost me £1,000 for 6 months. Is that a reasonable amount of money to spend on that 6 months? And you know, most of the time I think it probably would be. Or would you rather wait that 6 months and not have that performance?
Yeah.
That's the choice, really, isn't it? And if you don't need to do it, then don't do it.
Okay. So in terms of choosing, for example, the amount of RAM, I mean, it's basically get as much as you can afford, or?
No, not so much these days. Again, it used to be, but and again, it depends what computer you're buying. If you're getting a portable, then yes, absolutely. I mean, for audio use, I probably wouldn't get a laptop without the maximum RAM in it, really, because that is always going to be your limiting factor. So, you know, if you get a laptop with 32 gig of RAM in it, and you really need 64, you're never going to be able to get that again. You can't replace it these days. So, so that's going to be the downfall of your computer ultimately.
Right.
and the same to a large extent with hard drives. And people sometimes try to scrimp on the hard drive, and I don't think it's a good idea. I did it myself once, so I've got experience of that. I went for a 512 gigabyte internal drive, and it was okay for a few months, but then after probably 6 months, I found myself having to move stuff out onto a separate drive and trying to decide whether to keep my photos on a different drive and all that sort of thing. And it's just so much nicer to be able to have enough headroom to do what you want, really. So again, I wouldn't scrimp on that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and so just going back to RAM. So with the Mac Pro, for instance, you can get massive amounts of RAM in there, and it would be pointless to put all that in there because you can't. It doesn't make any difference until you start using it. I think the maximum we've put in one of the new Mac Pros is, I think it's 384 gig of RAM, which is for a very complex system that we thought probably it made sense to do that. Most of them we're putting 96 or 192. Okay. Most people probably aren't going to hit the buffers at 96, and of course that's one of the advantages of the Mac Pro is that you can always add more later.
Yeah. All righty. Good. That's a good overview. I mean, I'm not seeing any questions flying in, so I mean, unless there's something you want to add to that, we can wrap it up for today.
Yeah, I don't think so, but yeah, please do send questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a great opportunity. Hopefully we'll do one more this year in December. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, if people send questions in, as I said before, it's great to have them
in advance.
Earlier rather than later, because it's not just me here, and I don't have all the answers. And if there are things like we had Ben here the last time, because he was better at answering some of those questions, and we've got other people here who might be better to answer other questions.
We can pull in some different expertise and stuff
exactly,
like that. Yeah. So come on, guys, this is free. Yeah. Use it for sure. And I'll give it a little bit more of a push on social media and stuff, make people aware of it. I mean, I suspect that it's principally that not enough people are aware of it yet, but we'll see. We'll keep plugging away and see how it goes.
Great.
And all right. Well, thank you, Pete. Thanks for staying late. I know that you've stayed late for this, so thank you very much.
No problem at all.
And I wish you a good evening, and I'll speak to you soon, no doubt.
Great.
All right. Cheers,
Pete.
Brian. Take care.
See you later.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.